Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stoliarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, August 24th, 2025. Today, we have an important and in-depth conversation for you about privacy and security considerations of technological enhancement. Joining me is our U.S. Transhumanist Party Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, and our special guest today is Josh Universe, who is an American analog astronaut, science communicator, and biohacker. He is the founder of the International Biohacking Community, and he is also the founder of the Transhumanist Council. We had a previous virtual enlightenment salon with him on March 30th, 2025. So please, if you haven't watched that salon, go after this stream and watch it as well. Josh also previously joined us to discuss THpedia, the Transhumanist Encyclopedia, and today we will be delving into a topic that is extremely important to the U.S. Transhumanist Party. In fact, it is emphasized in Section 1 of our platform. So the very first section that we adopted on privacy, and I will read it for you to set the context. The United States Transhumanist Party strongly supports individual privacy and liberty over how to apply technology to one's personal life. The United States Transhumanist Party holds that each individual should remain completely sovereign in the choice to disclose or not disclose personal activities, preferences, and beliefs within the public sphere. As such, the United States Transhumanist Party opposes all forms of mass surveillance and any intrusion by governmental or private institutions upon non-coercive activities that an individual has chosen to retain within his, her, or its private sphere. However, the United States Transhumanist Party also recognizes that no individual should be protected from peaceful criticism of any matters that those individuals have chosen to disclose within the sphere of public knowledge and discourse. And I think this is a very important stance for us. I don't see either of the major political parties taking this stance. Some libertarians may be sympathetic to it, but the idea is you are sovereign over your own information, your own data, what you choose to disclose, what you choose to keep to yourself. Once you choose to disclose it, however, you need to accept the consequences of doing that. In other words, if you disclose something and somebody doesn't like it, somebody disagrees with it, somebody criticizes you for it, that is their right to do. And you need to accept that fact as well, that what you do choose to disclose can have implications in the world of public discourse and how people think about you in terms of how people choose to interact with you, but you are in control of the information that you put out there. Often that's not the world we live in today, and there have been some disturbing erosions of privacy as well as risks to privacy that are associated with some emerging technologies. And we have Josh to give us an in-depth discussion of this. Josh, welcome. We're pleased to have you today. Please proceed.
Thank you. So we're going to be going over privacy and security considerations of technological enhancement. So did you know that 23andMe, a personal genomics company, actually suffered a credential stuffing data breach, and that revealed over 6.9 million users' rough genetical information? So about me, my name is Josh Universe. I am a current student here at Florida Tech studying astrophysics and commercial enterprise in space. I'm the founder of the International Biohacking Community and Transhumanist Council. I do some work with Viva City, which is like a network state, and I do some astronaut stuff and some science communication. So first we're going to go over some real world breaches. We need to see, okay, why is this important? Why do we care? Then we're going to define what is privacy, what is security, and what's the difference. Then we're going to talk about what is technological enhancement. Now we're going to go into privacy and security risks of enhancement. So what are the possible risks of enhancing ourselves with these technologies? Then we're going to approach enhancement with a privacy and security mindset. So what can we do? How can we enhance ourselves while maintaining privacy and security as much as we reasonably can? Then I'm going to provide you guys some really cool actionable privacy and security tips. So these are things that you can do right now. You don't have to have any special fancy implants or anything. These are just things that you can do just right now. And then we'll go over contact information and Q&A. First, real world breaches. So first one, once again, is 23andMe. This was in October of 2023. The data exposed was personal information and broad ancestor information. So it wasn't exact. It was kind of like broad information, like, okay, are you from the United States? Did you have a European descent? Did you have an Asian descent? No raw DNA files were stolen. The method was called credential stuffing. So say you have a username and password that was leaked on one website. What attackers will try to do is take that same email, same password, and try to reuse it on hundreds of different sites. So for you to use your password on multiple sites, this is a way for you to get your potentially get your account information stolen. So do not reuse passwords across sites. Use a password manager. We will get into that at the end of the presentation. Next is the Insulet Omnipod. So this was in January of 2023. This data was personal health data and IP addresses. Users exposed around 29,000. The method was a site tracker privacy misconfiguration. So this is a bit complex. I'll kind of explain it. So in emails, you have things called personalized links, which are also kind of called magic links. When you click that, there are cookies that are loaded onto your browser from that link. It contains like identifying information, which comes from the database sent to your personal email, and it allows you to like log onto your website without having to type in your password. Well, in this scenario, the cookie that was in the email magic link was unsecured. So that means the third-party diagnostics like Google Analytics and stuff, and third-party advertisers that have tracking scripts on that website were able to access the cookies from the website's local storage. Well, somehow those cookies were able to associate health data and secured and allowed those third-party advertisers and diagnostic agencies to access that data, which is really bad. This is the device. This is the Insulet Omnipod 5. Now, this vulnerability was not with the device itself. It was with the cloud infrastructure on which the device communicates with. Next is the Zoll Medical. So yes, this was in January 2023, again, the same month. The data exposes personal health data from like a cardiac defibrillator device. It's like a wearable medical device. Users exposes over 1 million users. The method was a simple network misconfiguration. So an attacker got unauthorized access into an internal network and was able to access encrypted data. Privacy versus security. What is privacy? Privacy is about the control over who can view and use your data. So we're talking about controlling who can have my data and who can use my data. So an example is ensuring only authorized officials are disclosed with a patient's medical records. This is associated with the HIPAA laws. What is security? Security is about protecting our data from unauthorized access. So this is including preventative safeguards to ensure that the data we have is secure and that malicious actors are not able to access it. Example, implementing encryption and 2FA, two-factor authentication, into a hospital's EHR system, which stands for electronic health records. Privacy versus security. So here are a few scenarios, and I'm going to say, okay, is this a privacy scenario or a security scenario? This will kind of help you understand the difference between the two. First, a brain-computer interface company sells aggregated neural activity data without advertisers' consent, or to advertisers without the user's consent. This is a privacy breach because we're saying the company is sharing that data with advertisers without our consent, right? So it's about control over who has access to the data, right? This wasn't unauthorized because we probably signed some user and license user agreement and there was no exploitation going on, but the data was being shared without our consent. Why yet? This is concerned about how sensitive data is collected and shared. Next, a hacker or exploiter remotely gains control to a smart prosthetic limb. Well, this is a security vulnerability. This is not a privacy vulnerability because the hacker or exploiter is getting unauthorized access to the data. This is concerned about unauthorized usage and access of the device. We don't want that to happen. A lot of bad things could happen if such a scenario actually played out. Third one is a government mandates citizens to get their closed source. So that means the source code is not publicly viewable and auditable NFC implant, which is like a subdermal implant. We'll get onto that in a moment. This is a privacy vulnerability because this is dealing with how sensitive data is collected and shared. So whatever data that you might have on an implant, say in a few years, you have implants that have a lot more data and communication capabilities. If you're giving that data to the government, that's providing the government with a lot of data that they could use to potentially manipulate you or even serve you ads through contracts with private organizations. So what is technological enhancement? This is enhancement designed to enhance physical or mental capabilities. Here are some examples. Subdermal RFID/NFC implants. I will get on to what those are in the next slide. Even smartphones and wearables. You might be like, what? Smartphone's not an implant. Well, smartphone enhances your mental capabilities. You carry it around with you all the time. Even though it's not physically attached to you, you have it on you almost 24/7. Same with smartwatches and other wearables like Whoops and Auras and all sorts of other different smart trackers. Next is brain-computer interfaces. So these are data that can read and write information to and from your brain. So an example could be the Neurosity Crown, or even the Neuralink. And finally, medical devices like pacemakers and other like EEG monitors, Apple Watches, especially this device right here, the Zoll Medical Life Vest, and this device right here. So, what are subdermal RFID and NFC implants? If you don't know what they are things that are implanted subdermally in your skin, and they use a thing called RFID and NFC. NFC is like a high-frequency RFID. That's what you use in Apple Pay. So we have the capsule-type implants, the flex-type implants, and these are custom implants. This is called the peg leg. It's like basically like a Raspberry Pi that can store data, and it has this capability to serve as like an offline mesh network. This is like very custom. Don't try to implement something like this. This is by Dangerous Things, which is a subdermal implant manufacturer. This is cool. This has Java card applets, so you can do things like unlock your Tesla, use it as a two-factor authentication, like authentication provider kind of. So you can scan your phone on your arm and it can show up your 2FA codes. Actually, I have a video of that on my YouTube channel where I actually do that. You can use this as a U2F or a FIDO2 NFC security key. So if you have like one of those little YubiKeys that you put on the back of your phone, you can actually use it something like that. I think I do have, yeah. So basically like this is like a YubiKey. You can basically use an implant just like a NFC YubiKey. And then the capsule implants are very basic. They can just read and write basic in-depth data like your website, your contact, or contact information. It's like text, like a string of text on it. You can scan it and see the contact, scan it. It'll take you to a website, etc. So that's what subdermal RFID and NFC implants are, just if you did not know. Okay, so privacy and security risks of technological enhancement. Privacy risk one, data exploitation. So this, now we're not really considering current technologies like current subdermal RFID implants and current publicly available BCI technology, because there's not too much development, too much risk right now, but especially in the future, these are very important to consider. Risk, the neural implant data or biometric information is sold to advertisers or other actors without informed consent. This is a privacy risk. Outcomes, unauthorized parties have access to your data. Well, this could lead to things like higher health insurance or life insurance premiums if your biomarkers are not healthy. They could see information on your respective biomarkers or even neurological signals. However, they'd be able to extract those. And then the data is sent to a third party. They can analyze that data and they can be like, hey, Kansas City, let's increase your life insurance rates. You don't want that. Privacy risk two, workplace surveillance. Well, what if your workplace requires you to get a workplace mandated RFID implant or some type of advanced RFID implant where they're able to do remote tracking? Can't do that now with current implants, but in the future, that is something that could happen. Or neurological implant like a brain-computer interface. Outcomes, employers may make the compensation packages vary based on your performance data. That could be extracted through your biomarkers, your neurological brain waves, and other sources. They could also aggregate that with like a time tracker on your computer. And they could be like, okay, you aren't being so productive. We're going to pay you $10 an hour instead of your normal $30 an hour. Also, employers may have access to some of your data outside of workplace hours, especially if it's an implant mandated by a workplace. I actually did see there's something on the news where a workplace mandated like subdermal RFID implants. Now, these are like the normal ones that we have today. There was no privacy or security risk. Besides, if a employee scanned their implant to get into like an access controlled door, then they can see, okay, this person scanned it at this time, which is the same, which could still happen if you use like a phone to scan into like a door. So that, it's not necessarily a risk from the implant itself, but there are going to be, especially with more capabilities of the implant, there's going to be a high risk, especially for things like workplace surveillance. Privacy risk 3, government surveillance. We've been seeing a lot of this on the news. Government agencies may provide incentive, right? So they may make it seem like a good thing, or require citizens to provide data from biological or neural interfaces. For simplicity, if I'm saying a biological interface, it's like a subdermal implant or anything but a neural implant or brain-computer interface. A neural interface, I'm just talking about like a brain-computer interface as of now. Outcomes, potential discrimination of services, so government-offered services, based off of information from a neural interface, especially if aggregated with data from other sources like security cameras, Internet of Things devices. This could provide these systems, which would likely be automated, these automated systems, higher levels of confidence, right? So they see that you might have littered, but then they see some type of associated biomarker or some type of neural output, and that provides a higher confidence. Well, you could be discriminated against using some of their services. Or if you don't like the current leadership of an administration and they're able to sense that based off of data off of a brain-computer interface, well, they could also limit some of the access to your services or even raise rates on life insurance, health insurance, or limit the types of schools you can go to. A lot of this stuff is actually done in China, but I've seen things, with the European Union's been passing a lot of regulations the United States has. So this is something that could potentially become something of concern, potentially. Security risk, remote modification. So motor devices like connectivity-enabled prosthetic limbs or exoskeletons could be accessed remotely without proper security and encryption protocols. So some outcomes, physical harm. If someone has remote control access to a prosthetic limb, they can like make it hurt your, smash your face or do all sorts of other things that could cause unwanted harm against yourself or even others, which could involve a load of liability. Unauthorized authorization of other authentication systems. So if your prosthetic arm has access, or let's say your prosthetic hand has access to a door, and if they have these detachable hands, so if they are able to remotely make a hand move, which you can actually look on YouTube, there's this girl who has a prosthetic hand that can actually move on its own, like disconnected from the arm. So say in the future, if those have authentication credentials, those could be used to open authentication devices like workplace doors. Security risk 2, device theft. So certain types of devices that are easily attachable, such as non-invasive brain-computer interfaces like the Neurosity Crown, or those prosthetic hands, could be stolen, and the credentials on them could be used for unauthorized purposes, or the data that is stored on those could be extracted if there's a known device vulnerability. See, outcomes. Stolen interfaces with identity or payment modules could be used for fraudulent payments or identity theft. So say you have something like a identification document, like a DID, which stands for decentralized identification. If you have one of those on a brain-computer interface or detachable biological interface, those could allow people to go and spin your credit card up with your hand. Security risk 3, interface malware. So this is a bit of an advanced one, and this would require a interface with a bunch of complex systems. But if there's not appropriate sandboxing done to the processes that run on a biological or neural interface, then anything can happen. It depends on the capabilities of the interface. So if it's a critical interface, like a connected pacemaker, and someone is able to put malware on that, that pacemaker just may not work, and that could lead to death. Same for a neurological a neural interface. If in the future there are advanced neural interfaces that can write data to the brain, and that's able to attract some type of malware on it, then they're able to completely mess up your brain. They're able to, we just don't know. There's all sorts of potential scenarios that can happen where they could, control your brain or mess all sorts of different things up. Case point, we do not want this to happen. An enhancement with privacy and security mindset. So what can we do? Well, first thing, we want to adopt open source solutions. So open source is where the source code of something is publicly viewable and auditable. So if you go on GitHub, all those repositories, those are things called open source repositories. So people are able to see the code, they're able to audit the code for any security or privacy vulnerabilities, and they're able to contribute to the code. Pros allows public auditing of code and how data is handled and what subprocessors, if any, have access to the data. So if someone has a brain-computer interface and they look at the software in GitHub and they see that there's a post request being sent to Google, then they can be like, hey, they can notify the community of that respective implant, be like, hey, they're sending information to Google. We need to either just not use this product, or we need to submit a pull request to get that removed. Some cons, so some drawbacks, could be open source software may be vulnerable to security exploits if there's a complex system, so there's a lot going on, and if there's a small amount of contributors. So if there's not a lot of people looking over the code, something happens to slip by in a pull request, well, that can present a lot of vulnerabilities. And with open source software, you're able to just look at the code. So malicious actors can look at the code and be like, oh, here's vulnerability, let me exploit it. Some examples of companies that are using open source in their products is Neurosity. So once again, they have a thing called the Neurosity Crown, and I can actually show you that. One moment. So this is the Neurosity Crown. It is a wearable brain-computer interface. You put it like this. It's really cool. You can use a JavaScript SDK, which stands for a software development kit, and run custom applications on it. I did a research experiment in North Dakota where I was able to think, and I was able to basically send messages to ChatGPT and receive a response back through an earset, which is pretty cool. Another one is OpenBCI, so Open Brain Computer Interface. They make brain computer interfaces, and they make them very affordable, and they also provide you the 3D printing files. So if you wanted to 3D print the structure, they'll just sell you the nanodes, and then you can build it yourself for a very affordable price. This is a new player. They make things called AI pendants and smart glasses. They're all open source. It's on GitHub. You can actually buy the developer kit on their website. They are making more like a polished one that's meant for just normal consumers, not like hackers or biohackers or whatever. So they're also a cool company to look out for. Number 2, using widely adopted protocols. Well, we've heard a lot about this, especially with the advent of a thing called BitChat, which is a Bluetooth-powered mesh communication app. And they've tried making their own proprietary algorithm. Security researchers looked at that, and they're like, here's this vulnerability, here's another vulnerability, here's another vulnerability. And they suggested to them, hey, this can all be fixed if you adopt the Signal protocol. The Signal protocol is a communication protocol used by the Signal messenger, which is one of the best known messengers for privacy and security. So this is one thing we need to look out for. We need to implement and we need to advocate for using widely adopted protocols. So yeah, it is encouraged to use open source and widely adopted protocols when developing hardware or software for enhancement tech. Pros, significantly higher confidence in the security standards of hardware and software, especially for something that's been used, like the Signal protocol. That's been used on an app that's been around for years. It's been tested, it's been poked at, it's been everything, right? And any vulnerabilities have probably already been addressed years ago. So any new app that adopts that Signal protocol is automatically going to have a much higher level of confidence from the user base that it's private and secure. And that goes same with subdermal implants and neural interfaces. Another pro is better interoperability. So that means it's going to work better with other devices. So that could allow you to build a better ecosystem of devices, of like neural interfaces that could also communicate with biological interfaces. So it could get brain data, and it can also aggregate it with biomarker data, and it can provide some type of response from those respective aggregated outputs. And yeah, it can also lead to things like mesh networks or app development. So say you have multiple different types of biological interfaces, you can make a centralized app repository, like on Linux, something like the AUR, like the ArchView repository, or the Flatpak store, which are basically centralized places where you can actually download apps and they work across different types of systems. So something like this could be built for subdermal implants or neural interfaces. Once again, this company right here, Omni, they're actually building something like this. So actually building a thing where people can make open source apps and they can put them on GitHub, and they can actually get paid for the amount of users that use the app, not data being sold and nothing like that. It's basically the amount of users who use an app. They can get paid by Omni because they are both a open source, and they're a company that makes products, but they're also open source. So they'll sell products, but the products themselves are open source, which allows them to reward developers. So creating a similar ecosystem like that for subdermal implants would also be a great benefit of using a widely adopted protocol. Number 3, stronger privacy regulations. This has been under attack so much recently. More companies should adopt privacy regulations like the GDPR and the California CCPA. Pros: less subprocessors, those are third-party companies, would have access to your sensitive data. Also, a greater degree of individual autonomy, right? So this allows you, say, the neural interface, to not have to feel nervous about thinking about, you not liking the administration of a current government, or you not liking, a newly passed law of a current government, right? You won't have to have that worry if the code is open source, you're able to see that, hey, no data is being sent to a third-party subprocessor, and it's also backed by these stronger privacy regulations. Cons: well, higher likeliness that proprietary algorithms will require some type of subscription fee or higher upfront cost, right? If something is free, well, they have to make money somehow. How is Gmail making money? Well, they're making money by taking data across all the different services that they operate and selling them to third-party advertisers so they can show you ads that they think you'd be interested in. And those ads receive significantly more money than just normal ads, normal non-targeted ads. So if something like this was implemented, right, then you're probably going to have to pay a bit of a higher price so that company is able to make money on the products and services that they provide, and some type of subscription fee if they are also making software that is constantly updated and maintained. Now, if we did use open source software, this would help with the con. Number 4, on-device data attestation. So this is something that's used right now in things called decentralized identities called DIDs. And this basically says, it's basically like, if you go to a website that's an adult website and they ask you, and they want to check, hey, are you 18 years old? Well, we've already seen this right now going on with a lot of websites where I think the Europe government, they want to restrict access to all sorts of internet websites based on your age and stuff. So this is an open source way this could be implemented. So you can have your device credentials stored on the device, not in the cloud. So we're reducing who has access to your data. And then if someone needs to know if you have a specific piece of information on your device, you're able to do a thing called attest it, basically saying, yes, I have this information. Now, this would be done using probably private public key cryptography, which is a more secure way of doing it, and also ensures they actually have the data instead of just saying, yes, I have the data, or providing the full amount of data in like a plain text format, which is insecure. So data types you could attest is medical data. So we'd want this to only be accessible in emergency situations. And this would be backed by biomarker status. So say if your heart rate was flat, you did not have a heart rate, then any like subdermal implants or epidermal implants or neural interfaces, they'd be able to change to a state where they're able to attest medical data. Like, are you an organ donor? Or do you have a cryopreservation contract? And if so, what are the steps to provide that cryopreservation care before like the SST team arrives or something? Another one is access credentials. So a decentralized identifier, or if you have a door authentication control, like an ID card for work. You can also make it so instead of having to carry around a wallet, which could be easily stolen, you could have it on a subdermal implant. And if you're authenticating with the door, so you're scanning your hand against a door, all you can make it do is say, okay, the door can say, hey, do you have this piece of data, or do you have this public key? And they can be like, yes, I have this public key, generates it from the private key. Oh, the keys match up. Okay, I'll let you in. And if we want to do this in a more privacy preserving way, you can just have it attest that data, not who it is, or what is your name, what is your email. Just say, hey, I have this authentication credential, and then it would let you in. And yeah, DIDs, which stands for decentralized identifiers. So yeah, pros, selective data disclosure. So say if, once again, with this medical data, say you're storing all sorts of biomarkers, you're storing thousands of different types of biomarkers at thousands of different collection times. Well, you can make it so you're only attesting, okay, the data that needs to be attested, the data that is requested, instead of giving all of your data, which provides a much more greater security and privacy risk because there's a greater attack surface. Another one is a reduced attack surface, right? So you're sharing less data. It's called data minimization, which is a common privacy practice. Actionable privacy and security steps. So this is something where you don't need a fancy implant. You don't need anything. This is something that everyone can do, that you can do for free, and that significantly enhances both your privacy and your security online. First is use a password manager. Why would I want to use a password manager? Well, once again, if you're reusing your passwords across multiple different sites and one of those sites suffers a breach of information, people can once again use a credential stuffing attack. So we're using that email, we're using that password from one site on thousands of different sites, and they're able to, and provides a greater attack surface for people to access more of your accounts. Password managers I recommend is ProtonPass, Bitwarden, and KeePassXC. So ProtonPass is by the Proton Mail company, now called Proton. They have a free plan. They are backed by a reputable company. It's been around since 2014, I think. And they are cross-platform, so it works on iPhone, Android, web, not Linux, but web, Mac OS, Windows. Cons. Well, some features require payment, which, you could say it's not really a con because they're not selling your data, but they do require payment for some features. Bitwarden, this is widely well known. This is probably the most popular in my opinion. They have a free plan. They are backed by, once again, a reputable company. It's also open source, so people can see all the code of Bitwarden, audit it for security vulnerabilities and privacy vulnerabilities, and submit changes, also called pull requests, to address those concerns. And it's also cross-platform. It's basically available on every single type of device, every single type of browser. Once again, cons, some features like the TOTP, which is like your 2FA authentication codes, those require payment. I don't really think of it as a con because you really shouldn't be storing your 2FA codes in your password manager, right? If your password manager gets breached, well, then your 2FA codes get breached, and that doesn't really serve the purpose of 2FA. Also is KeePassXC, so this is local, right? So you're not storing your data on a cloud like Bitwarden or Proton. You're storing it fully locally. You have full control of your data, and who can have access to your data. It's fully free, right? There's no payment required. It's open source. It's fully local. So the cons, it's not cloud-based, which may be inconvenient for some. There are workarounds. You could take your KeePass database, which is literally just like a little database file, and you can put that on something like Google Drive or Proton Drive and have it encrypted, so you have the best of both worlds. So now, 2FA. 2FA helps prevent some simple account takeover attacks, such as someone knowing your username and password or having access to your email address. So this is from least secure to most secure. So SMS, like a text message, this is the least secure, but it's better than nothing. This is vulnerable to a thing called a SIM swap attack, which is where someone is doing a thing called social engineering. They'll call up your company, whether it's Spectrum or T-Mobile or Verizon, and they'll be like, hey, I lost access to my account. Maybe they'll play like a noise of a crying baby in the background to make it the representative more likely to hand over your information or change the phone on what your SIM is on. This is actually quite common. Most providers fall victim to this. I think it's about like 80%. Don't take me right on this. I think it's about like 80% of the social engineering attacks are actually successful. So this is something to watch out for. Someone can literally call your phone provider. If they know your phone number, they can look up, okay, who's your phone provider? And they can be like, hey, I lost access to my phone. I lost my phone or something. And if they do a little bit of OSINT on you, which is called open source intelligence, they can find where you live. They could find your birth date. Then they can use that information to help kind of verify. So say if the support representative asks, hey, when's your birthday? They'll have the information right in front of them. They'd be like, hey, this is my birthday. And it'll make the customer support representative more likely to change over your SIM to the attacker's phone, which then if they try to log into your account and it has 2FA, the SMS 2FA, they can get a code sent to their phone, and you would never know, right? So someone did a SIM swap attack. You would never know until you try to send a message to your friend or someone calls you and they realize it's not going through. And also in very rare cases, unencrypted SMSs can be intercepted, but this is for a very high threat model. This is something that government adversary or a local police department would have to implement with something called a Stingray or a cell device simulator attack. These are not too common unless you go to things like protests and stuff. But if your phone has 2G enabled, so even if you have like a 5G phone, it can still downgrade the signal to 2G. But this can be disabled in Android devices. Next is an authentication app. This is also known as TOTP or time-based one-time passwords. This is not phishing resistant because someone can have a fake website or a request. So say someone sends you an email saying, hey, we need your 2FA code. It could lead you to a fake website, and you could put in your 2FA code from your phone onto that website, and then they could send a GET request or a POST request to like a login form or something on the actual website. This is very rare, but it could happen. But this is like 10 million times more secure than SMS. The most secure are those security keys, right? So those YubiKeys, or if you have like a VivoKey Apex Flex, those have the same type of NFC security key functionality. These are fully phishing resistant, as we know of. There's been no known vulnerabilities or exploits, slippies. They also require physical access to the device, which makes it harder for someone to phish you or social engineer you. Even if it's on a fake website and request it, it can't do it because the site host itself has a key, and then it uses like some type of like public key cryptography to match those keys and verify they're accurate. So you can't be phished with these. You can also add a PIN for extra security. So say you plug it into so say when it prompts you to use a security key, you plug it into your computer. It'll also ask you for a PIN if you set that up. So some authentication apps I recommend are Proton Authenticator. This is very new, but it's also backed by a very reliable and reputable company, Proton. It's also cross-platform. Another one is called Aegis Authenticator. This is only on Android, but it is free and open source, and also has a nice minimal design. Security keys. These, I only recommend YubiKey by Yubico. I'm not sponsored with them, but these are like the only things I've seen used. And these are like what all websites say, pull out your YubiKey. These are kind of like the mainstream thing. They're established and they're a trusted company. Millions of people use them. People at Cloudflare use them. People almost at every company use them for 2FA. They're well supported. They spike the FIDO2 protocol, the U2F protocol. They also have an authenticator app. So you can take your YubiKey, either plug it into your computer or tap it against the back of your phone, and also get those authentication codes for the time-based one-time passwords. And then, this is for the Yubico 5C NFC series or higher. So not just the Yubico 5 security key model, that does not support it. Specifically the Yubico 5C NFC model or higher. Special keys like the BIOS series, which is right here, can also require a fingerprint before authentication, which provides much more security. Third, I recommend using something like Proton Mail or Tutanota, now called Tuta, for email. Why? Standard email providers like Gmail and Yahoo are known for collecting email metadata, which is basically what type of, who did you send an email to at what time, what's the subject, what are any relevant attachments. So it's kind of like everything but the email body itself. And sharing with third parties. They also have been known to share like the full email body in the past, but they no longer do this, which is pretty good, at least for Gmail. I can't really say for Yahoo. Providers like ProtonMail and Tutanota do not sell email metadata or email full body context to third parties, and they also minimize data collection, right? So say if a government or some type of other company tries to request information, they'll be like, I don't have the information because they've already done the data minimization. ProtonMail, they have a large ecosystem of services. They've got Lumo, which is like an AI, Proton Pass, Proton Wallet, which is like a Bitcoin wallet, Proton Docs, which is a Google Docs alternative, Proton Mail, that's like their flagship product. It's been around forever, Proton VPN, Proton Drive, Proton Calendar, Proton everything. It also has a better user interface, in my opinion. Also, you have Tuta. It's more affordable. But the biggest thing with Tutanota is if you have like a business, they have very nice white label functionality, including custom webmail domains. So you could go do something like mail.transhumanistparty.org, and it will load up this webmail interface. Proton cannot do that. 4, add your email to the Have I Been Pwned leaked credential detection. This is free. Just search this on Google, DuckDuckGo, or Brave, and it'll show up. So why? Your email and passwords from data leaks are shown on the dark web or even on the ClearNet, like the TAP leak, which we'll get to in a moment. And yeah, this makes it easier for attackers to hijack one or more of your websites, especially if you reuse passwords. So what this will do is it will constantly scan recent data breaches on the dark web and notify you, hey, your email has been detected in one of these data breaches. Here's the data breach name. Here's the website. We recommend you to change your password. And then you can go and change your password. And as soon as you're able to know, before attackers are able to see your information and try to attack your other accounts. 5, limit who gets sensitive data. Oh boy, the TAP, we've seen this a lot on the news. Why? Well, the more companies with access to your sensitive data, like identification documents, your social security number, your date of birth, etc., the higher risk of that data being compromised from a surface attack, right? There's more people who hold that data, so there's a high risk of one of those individual providers being exposed and your data being on the dark web or even the ClearNet. An example, over 13,000 private images, including identification documents and face verification pictures, along with location metadata, and over 1.1 million private messages across 3 separate data breaches on the TAP, which is like an app for people to post like pictures of their significant other and like provide like green flags, red flags, and kind of like vet them. The data was obtained through a public storage bucket. No password or no protection. It was posted publicly on 4chan. A public storage bucket. This is literally like going to a website and just seeing the images there. There's no encryption, no database, no server to get into. It's literally you can go into a website and see, okay, say you go to the website, you go into your developer console, you go to the network tab, and you can see the post and get requests, and you can see, okay, oh, there's a get request from this website, right? And it'll show the storage bucket. You can just go to that website and you can query, which is like search all of the different types of data on it, and it'll just show it to you. No password, nothing. So this is a very, very, very bad privacy and security vulnerability. Like this is probably the worst thing someone could do is have a public storage bucket. Yeah, so besides that, just some news. I actually did make a new privacy and security channel in our Discord and forums to kind of encourage more of this type of discussion and hopefully, maybe make some change. Here's our main website for the Transhumanist Council. I'll give you guys just, a few seconds each to scan those, and then I'll go on to the next slide. And then the main website for the International Biohacking Community. And our forums. So you can click scan here to go to the home page and scan here to directly sign up. We also have a mobile app for Reform. So we have one in test flight, which is kind of like the beta for iOS apps, and also on Android. And then our 2 main Discord servers for the International Biohacking Community, the Biohacker Lounge, and then one for cognitive enhancements like nootropics, supplements, even neural interfaces too. And then finally, just our 2 most popular servers for the Transhumanist Council. This is our main server right here. All right, and if you want to scan this for any presentation feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. I think I still have this on the previous one, but just you can submit it, I'll still receive it. So you guys are going to have to scan that. All right, and yeah, finally, if you want to contact me or send me a connection on LinkedIn, you can scan this one. If you have any questions or inquiries, you can scan here, or if you're going to see more of my other social medias or anything else, you can scan here to get to my Linktree page. And that is it.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh. And we will leave this slide up while you answer the first question, which comes from Daniel Tweed. He wonders, why aren't more people more attentive to privacy and security issues? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, gosh. There's a lot. Oh, gosh. I think one is just convenience. I mean, I think people have so much, I mean, we all do. We all have so much going on in our lives. We have events to go to. We have people to talk with. We've got school. We've got work. We've got so much. The last thing on most people's minds is privacy. I mean, especially, you know, even if you want to think about privacy or signing up a service, you even want to think about it, right? You click the privacy policy and it's like 40 pages of a bunch of legal jargon. That's going to be very hard to understand. I think there's just not enough public discourse around it. Really, up until now, there's been a lot more recent public discourse with things like the Clippy movement, which is more kind of, you know, individual autonomy with regard to technology, but that's still a lot with regard to privacy. And also from YouTube and other sites implementing age verification checks using artificial intelligence and requiring like your identification documents and stuff. I think we're getting a lot more public discourse around privacy and security. But I think it's just because people have so much going on in their lives, and privacy is like the last thing they want to care about, especially with regard to convenience. People just want to sign up for a service and use it. So that's what I would say.
Yes, and Daniel follows up with this comment. Yes, it comes across as overwhelming and inconvenient. And earlier on, Mike Lazine wrote, essentially, this is too much information, so I'm sticking with what works for me. So are there, I wonder, good practices that are also easy enough to adopt and quick enough to adopt that even people who have very little time could improve their privacy incrementally?
Yeah, I think first thing, if you have a Google account, go to the privacy settings. Just go to myaccount.google.com, you can search it, and go to the privacy settings, turn off Google Activities, which basically if you have an Android phone or if you have the Google app in an iPhone and you give it location permission, everywhere you go, so say you go to Starbucks, you go to a movie or something, it'll track everywhere you've been throughout the day, and you can actually see all of your location history on Google's website. Which, guess what? They most likely, I'm not going to say definitely, but they most likely probably sell that to third-party companies for targeted ads and stuff. So go to Google's My Activity page, go through all the privacy settings, turn off all the web and app location histories, turn all that off, shut it all down. Same with your phone. Go to your phone's privacy settings, disable anything that's unnecessary or disable any unnecessary permissions that apps have. Disable Apple's advertising ID. You can just go and click reset advertising ID and then turn off all the analytics and diagnostics data collection. So I think that's probably the best place is go to like Windows privacy settings, go to Mac OS privacy settings, iOS privacy settings, Android privacy settings, Google privacy settings, Facebook privacy settings, anywhere you use, just go to the privacy settings and just go through all those. I think that's pretty easy and kind of gets both the privacy on hardware and privacy on software, like online services and stuff kind of taken care of.
Yes, thank you for that response. Now, you had mentioned YubiKey, and John H. Also recommends using one of those, though he says he understands those have been hacked too. Do you know of any potential ways that a YubiKey could be hacked? And if so, what are the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to look right now, see something about a side channel vulnerability. It looks like the only way they can be hacked, just from what I see right here, is if someone has physical access to the key, right? Someone physically has the key. Looks like they might be able to clone it, but also like something like this, it would be discovered in this priority patch by now. This happened in September of 2024. But really the only real way that something could be hacked, if there's a vulnerability, is going to be if someone has physical access to the device, which for most threat models, the chance of that is basically 0 to none. So yeah, any like online or remote hacks, that's not really possible unless they break encryption algorithms, which is also very difficult, especially as all the companies continue to upgrade and adopt things like post-quantum encryption and stronger encryption algorithms. So I don't really see any way they could be hacked unless someone has physical access to the device, which is already very rare. And if there's a 0-day vulnerability, that's not patched yet.
Yes, thank you for that answer. Now, is it also true for YubiKey, as John H. states, that not all sites support it?
Yeah. Sadly, not a lot of sites support physical security keys. Most of the main ones do. Facebook does, Google does. Even like those sites have upgraded like account protection programs. So if you go on Google and search Google Advanced Account Protection, you can make it to where after you enter your username and password, you have to plug in a YubiKey or other security key to get into your account. No SMS backup, no email password reset. It's very strong and it would require like a security key. So yeah, more sites need to adopt it, but the main ones do. And a lot of other sites are starting to adopt physical security keys. Even one site, even like very niche ones, you'll see, you can use a security key. Which is really nice. So slowly but surely, more sites will adopt it. But yes, that is a major problem right now.
Yes, thank you, Josh. And John does point out Proton Mail and PayPal do support YubiKey, so
yes.
That is an advantage of that approach. And also, For Freedom writes that imagine you become a cyborg and forget about your fingerprint verification. So that could be a concern in the future. If you ever have to replace your limbs in any manner, make sure you still either have a way to unlock something that requires fingerprint verification or change that to not require it. Now, I have an issue where my fingerprints apparently cannot be read very well by certain devices. And I've had this before where fingerprint scanners would just consistently register a low quality fingerprint in quotations. And I was told this would be an issue that I would be faced with my entire life. But the last time I tried a fingerprint scanner was around 2008. So I wonder if you're aware of this, whether fingerprint scanners have improved in the intervening years to recognize more fingerprints so that the entire population potentially could use them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they've definitely gotten better over the years. A lot of phones are now doing fingerprints under the screen, so you can tap on the screen, not iPhones, but most Android phones are. So they're definitely getting better, much better than the old school fingerprint scanners that you hook up to you physically plug into your computer. Much better. I think the iPhone 17, the newest model, is also going to come with a fingerprint scanner, on the side right here, how it used to be. Right? No, not how it used to be, but how on Android phones, you can click here and it scans your fingerprint, on the Pixel Fold. You can click here. So the iPhone 17, I think, will support that, which is pretty nice. But yes, they have been getting better.
Yes, thank you, Josh. And also for freedom rights,
Yes.
they like when things are secured with physical devices.
Yes,
So,
old school. Yes.
yes. And along these lines, John H. points out, if he were a super hacker, the password file would be a juicy target. So his passwords stay in an old-fashioned paper book. Inconvenient for him means inconvenient for hackers. So unless a hacker breaks into his house and finds the specific notebook, they won't get the passwords. On the other hand, a notebook can be lost as well.
Exactly. It gets lost. It can be inconvenient too, right? There's a lot of security with that. It can also be very inconvenient. If you have a lot of sites you log into, you don't get that nice autofill. You don't get to just log in on your phone and just, pull up your passwords. But also it's very secure, right? If someone wants to get access to those passwords, they have to physically first find out where you live, come into your home. So if you have like a home security system, you have, a hardened down door and stuff, they have to get into your house. Then they have to get through you, right? Self-defense. If you have a knife, if you have other tools, they've got to get through you. Then they have to find where it is, right? And then if it's in a safe, they've got to get through the safe, right? There's so many layers of physical security, which is kind of the best you could really get for passwords. It's just old-fashioned. You store it in a notebook, you put it in a safe. So yeah, that's great. I like that.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Now I would like to discuss NFC and RFID implants a bit more. So here's a video, how transhumanists prevented the ban on microchip implants in Nevada in 2019. There was an effort by the U.S. Transhumanist Party to achieve revisions to a bill that was proposed in 2019, which was originally quite troubling because it would have banned even voluntary microchip implants. And what motivated this bill was that one of the assembly members read this article about the company that you mentioned, Josh, called 3 Square Market. And 3 Square Market was the company that voluntarily asked its employees to have these implants. And this became a headline news story, even though the employees didn't actually object and they had a choice not to get implanted. And this company was in the business of making these implants for voluntary insertion into their customers. So this assembly member decided this was a huge intrusion of privacy, and this was also a risk for employers because essentially he was concerned that employers would either coerce or influence their workers to get these implants for tracking purposes. However, we brought in a cyborg magician, Anastasia Sin, to testify before the Nevada legislature. And this bill, Assembly Bill 226, would have banned even voluntary microchip implants that people would have used for their own personal, let's say, needs, like what Zoltan Istvan got when he campaigned for president in 2016. Chip, an RFID chip between his thumb and index finger. I don't have one, but this is where it would be located, which enabled him to unlock his phone or open doors if he placed his hand directly adjacent to the lock. And what the legislators needed to be educated on was that these implants require really close proximity to a device in order to be able to interact with it. So it's not the case that somebody could remotely track a person with an RFID implant. Somebody would literally have to be like this close in order to be able to track the individual. And I wonder, Josh, you mentioned the risk that employers could use this tracking technology, or other entities, maybe governments, could use tracking technology in the future. Wouldn't it have to be a very different technological architecture in order to
Yes.
enable remote tracking. And
Very.
so couldn't like a mobile phone be a much more effective tracking device if somebody installs an app on the phone and that app then relays data to the entity that is doing the tracking?
Yeah, your phone, it's the best tracking device there is. I mean, if it's a government adversaries or a private company like Google, your phone is the best tracking device, right? You have your SIM card, which allows something called cell tower triangulation, which is basically where your phone's trying to say, hey, I want to get the best signal. Let me keep pinging several cell towers. And then, in that case, you're providing your IMEI, your IMSI, your name, your subscriber identity number, and then your carrier. So that's one good way for it to be a tracking device for government. And then for private, all your apps, right? Each app has different privacy features that your phone's operating system has granted to it. So you have Google's My Activities feature, right, where it shows, all, everywhere you've been. That's the best tracking device there is, right? It has all the sensors, has everything. So yeah, if you had like some type of subdermal implant or epidermal implant, transdermal implant, neural interface, it would require all of those different types of sensors and technologies, right? When you already have them all on your phone. Now, eventually, I think when the phone, you've got the smartwatches and stuff. You've got the smart glasses that are coming out too, smart contact lenses. I think over time the phone will start to kind of fade away, like the touch phone will start to fade away. So I think eventually then those devices would become more of surveillance devices if you got them from the wrong companies, right? So if Apple released some type of epidermal interface, like where it set on your arm and collect the data from your biomarkers and stuff like that, then it could turn into, subdermal implants are surveillance devices, right? But right now, with the very simple, very close range RFID and NFC technology, they're not a concern. I also do have a video that I do want to share showing how close it has to be. So yeah, I will share it with you right now.
Hey guys, I'm going to show you guys how I use two-factor authentication on websites with my subdermal electronic system. So first, I'm going to open my app, scan just like this. Go ahead and click one-time passwords. Go ahead and log in. And then go and enter my one-time passcode. Boom, I am in with top-notch subdermal.
There you go. So that's basically like what these, let me share the screen. There we go. That's basically what these are right here, these subdermal implants. That's what this one is right here, flex tip implant. I saw a comment by Jason. I saw something about like police and some type of I think it was like a medical privacy question. If you're going to feature that one.
Yes. So
Here we go.
if you have it to where your phone unlocks with a fingerprint, do you think cops can physically force your thumb on your phone to unlock it if you haven't been charged with a crime yet? Now, I do know that there needs to be probable cause for a search, and even in cases where there's probable cause, the law limits certain prerogatives. Like if a policeman pulls you over in Nevada, let's say you've been driving erratically, you do not have to consent to a breathalyzer test. And the Nevada Supreme Court actually struck down the idea of implied consent as unconstitutional. So if you get pulled over and you don't take a breathalyzer test, you could still get convicted for reckless driving, or if they have a different way to find that you've been under the influence, you could still be convicted of driving under the influence, but you cannot be convicted of this implied consent notion or violation because you refuse to take the test. So there have been other cases, say the FBI tried to get Apple to essentially unlock the security systems on Apple phones to install a backdoor as a surveillance mechanism, and Apple refused. Apple actually held out and did not allow the FBI to do that, to Apple's credit. So very interesting considerations, though, and this is where policy advocacy, I think, is extremely important, because through policy advocacy, we can shape the legal landscape in terms of what police are or are not allowed to do, especially for people who haven't been charged with a crime. For people who have been charged with a crime, a judge can issue a warrant. With the Fourth Amendment the way that it is, the right to privacy is not absolute, in the sense that if there is a criminal case ongoing, yes, the police can search your items, your home, your computers, whatever may provide relevant evidence, but you have to be on trial for a crime. And I think that's the way it should remain.
If there is probable cause, then if there's probable cause and there's biometrics, if your phone has like a fingerprint reader or Face ID, then they can make you unlock that device. If you do not have biometrics enabled and there is probable cause, you would need a warrant to get into a device with a PIN code. So you could ask someone, hey, what's the PIN code to this device? But they can invoke their right to remain silent, and therefore they would not be able to get the data off the device, okay, so they don't have the PIN code, unless they got a judge-signed court warrant to search specifically, including that device and their respective passcode, where then the person would have to give up the passcode. So actually it's more private it's more private with respect to if you are in that type of situation where there is potential probable cause for a police officer or other government official to try to request information off your phone, to actually not use biometrics, because then they would have to actually get that warrant instead of just making you unlock it with biometrics, which they can do with probable cause.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very interesting. Now, Jennifer Hughes writes that she thinks phones will fade with the development of teletactics. And I've been wondering about this because it seems to me as new devices have been introduced, to some extent mobile phones have consolidated certain old devices like traditional phones and MP3 players or CD players even before them. I'm old enough to have had portable CD players where you could put a CD player in a little handbag and you could put like 20 CDs in there as well and alternate among the CDs, and that was your entertainment on a long trip. But of course, with first devices like the iPod and other MP3 players, and then with mobile phones, that became obsolete. However, the desktop PC has not become obsolete because it is a much better tool for productivity than mobile devices that just don't have an interface for typing something out very quickly, and even say for graphic design or any sort of complex manipulation of images or symbols. Having a lot of real estate on your screen, having a mouse is still not beat by any sorts of voice commands, any sorts of shortcuts on smaller devices. So I wonder, some futurists predict that in the future computers will be embedded into objects, into the broader environment, and surely there could be some of that, but would that make dedicated purpose-specific devices go away necessarily? Because I don't see anything replacing a PC anytime soon for, let's say, deep-focused productivity. But what do you think, Josh?
Sure, yeah. So I think with regard to a computer, I think it's a very good input machine, right? You've got the mouse, you've got the keyboard. They are very good, simple, and tactile input machines. I think if that were to be replaced, it would be through improvements in user interfaces, right? We already have, the folding phone, right? You've got the phone where you've got one screen, it'll fold up into two, right? And you have a tablet. You're already replacing the iPad, which is kind of designed for, on-the-go productivity, right? So I think as technology improves over time, and I think as user interfaces improve over time, that it could make the computer obsolete, especially as, you can do all sorts of things on a smartwatch, right? You can do all sorts of things even now with those the Apple Vision, right? The Apple Vision Pro headset or the Meta Pro headset, or even smart contacts or even smart glasses. They have glasses where you can it can transcribe people speaking other languages in real time, which is kind of cool. And it shows up in a little screen, a little HUD in your glasses. So I think over time, those type of standardized devices like the computer, I think they probably will go away. It's not going to be there forever. I think, if time runs, thousands of years in the future, I think most likely it's going to be embedded in some type of neural or biological interface combination. You're already kind of seeing that with the Apple Watch. The new Apple Watch, you can basically pinch your finger, and you can kind of control some things on your Apple Watch. Same with the Apple Vision Pro. You can do that little, I think it's like this. You can use this tap, use this to swipe. So those types of novel input methods, just using your hand, can control things on the Apple Vision Pro, which kind of can be, I think in some situations, can be much more intuitive than a mouse, right? Especially if you're doing things in a 3D space, instead of having to hold a VR controller or something, or trying to do CAD work on a mouse, you just have your hand, right? You have your hand, you have maybe a sensor attached on your walls, and that provides much more fine and granular control. So I think over time, that could definitely replace standard interface devices like a computer. I think devices that are someone said devices kind of in the public space. I think those would provide a significant privacy concern. A lot of privacy vulnerability, especially if there's multiple people using the same device. I think in certain ways the future could occur, right? If there's much more of a quote unquote shared future where multiple people are using the same input device, you go to a public library, right? And you have several people using the computers at the public library, that there's a significant privacy concern, right? That's why it says, never log in or make sure to log out of this account if you're using a public computer. So I think over time, standardized computing systems like the computer will fade away, with improvements to user interfaces and input technologies like, your finger and your hand and stuff. And I think public environment computing systems, I think those will provide or impose a greater privacy and security risk.
Yes, and I think any sort of system where it's possible for one's data to be commingled with that of others will pose a greater privacy and security risk. Now, Daniel Tweed had a related comment: not backing up crucial data is another widely neglected security matter.
Yes.
And I bring this up because as technologies advance and one generation of technologies transitions into another, sometimes it may be difficult to extract data from the older format of technology. Like libraries for decades have backed up documents in what is called microfiche. I don't know how much you know about microfiche, Josh, but back in my day, so they had these special readers where you insert this film into the readers, and then you would be able to look at an old article kind of through a screen. It almost resembled an overhead projector in terms of how it appeared, except it wasn't necessarily projected onto a bigger screen.
I think I remember. Yeah. It's like you put the paper in, and then it has the little light, and it puts it on the screen. Yes.
Right. So this was an old technology when I was introduced to it during the, let's say, beginnings of the proliferation of personal computers into households. And these libraries that created a lot of these microfiche documents then had the challenge of transferring them onto computer formats that people could actually read. So the concern would be if computers were to become obsolete, at least PCs as they are now, then somehow we would have to transfer those files. There would have to be format compatibility, and the new devices would have to have the ability to read them, and you would have to be able to recall them. Like, you wouldn't have a mouse, you wouldn't have the file hierarchy that exists on a PC. So somehow you'd have to be able to navigate those. Maybe through your smart glasses, you would see a similar kind of menu, and you would select, and there would be gestures for selecting in order to bring up those files. So very interesting. But yes, in whatever format you can, back up your data, because chances are, if it's confined to one device, that is not going to be preserved over a sufficiently long time frame.
Sure. Not only is it could be considered a privacy vulnerability. I will say, if you back up data, there is more of a security risk because your data is in more places, but mainly it's an issue with regard to data availability, right? Making sure you're able to access your own data. I recommend backing up. If you have a server, make sure not only the file system itself is backed up, but all the individual programs. Like if you have if a program has like a JSON file, right, for all your settings, make sure that's backed up too. So you have multiple layers of backups. For backups, I recommend the 1, 2, 3 backups system. So you have one on-site backup of 2 different types of mediums. So maybe you use macOS Time Machine, and then you have a local NAS, network attached storage system, with your other time shift backup machine, which is basically like a backup system in macOS. And then the 3 stands for you have a third offsite backup system, right? So you have maybe a linked Synology NAS, or maybe your friend has a thing called a Synology NAS, which is basically a fancy network attached storage system, where you can send your time shift backups to them and they can hold it, and they can't see the data, they can't access it because it's encrypted, and only you have the private key. So I recommend backing up your data for data availability.
Yes, thank you, Josh. And we have a number of other questions from the YouTube audience, but first let's go to Art Ramon for his question.
I've always heard that maybe some of these portable devices would be powered by 6G. I haven't heard anything lately about this. And also, gesture computing. That started like a decade ago and died. I remember sort of suggesting that using sign language interfacing. And now it seems like some of the sign language programs I've used have much better recognition of sign language input. But I really haven't seen development of anyone trying to use that as an input to any other interface, or say like Apple Vision Pro, which is already discontinued. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the Apple Vision Pro, I think the main reason it was discontinued is because it was like $3,000, which for most people it is absurdly expensive, especially considering that you can get like the Oculus 3, I think, for like $500. They're planning to, the rumor to, be making like a cheaper version of it that still has all the same features at a much affordable price point. But I also think right now we're kind of in that intersection of like, now we're starting to see, you have like your fancy computers and stuff, but now we're starting to see AI pendant devices. We're starting to see smart glasses. We're starting to see smart contacts, in very early development. We're starting to see brain computer interfaces, right? These are all taking different types of input interfaces. And you've got the smartwatch, you got the smart rings, you've got all these different devices. So I think right now we're kind of in the intersection of transitioning from that, keyboard and mouse type system, or, tap and swipe type system, to more of like the gesture-based systems that we're starting to see on things like, the Vision Pro, or even like some of those AI pendants. Like some of those AI pendants, you can still do this same type of gesture. I think it's not the Rabbit R1. There's another type of pendant that has like a little camera, like a little laser camera, and you can still do some of those gestures to control, to swipe through information on it. It's like a little like laser system that like kind of points at your hand, and you can like kind of swipe up and see information. So we're not there yet. I do think over like the next 10 years, like gesture-based systems will become more mainstream, if not gesture-based systems like with your hand, but more like systems with like neural thought. I think there are some like devices that are starting to like use that type of technology, mainly just things like the brain-computer interfaces, right, where you can just think and you can like switch songs on Spotify or talk to ChatGPT. But also that's all developer stuff, right? It uses a public SDK. So I think right now we're kind of in the building phase with new types of input mechanisms compared to like, keyboard and mouse or tap and swipe type system, seen on phones and computers.
Now the 6G?
Yeah, 6G. Yeah, I don't know too much about 6G. I mean, it's sixth generation. I know that. But
It's
I believe
power
that
devices, not just the information.
Yes, okay.
master.
Sure, yeah, okay, yeah. So I think that's I would assume it has like the wireless air charging thing. I've seen like a few demos of it where you have like a little base station and then you can like have your phone sitting anywhere and it'll receive very small bursts of power. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how the data is transmitted, right? If the data is transmitted, if it's encrypted in transit, then there'd be an enhanced, well, it's already like, just using a phone now, using 5G, you're already sending data over, cellular signals if you're connected to a cell tower. I mean, I wouldn't really see it being too much different besides it charging your devices. You're already sending the data over that cellular medium. So unless it's like a mesh system that it's going to support of some type, which wouldn't really make sense anyways, because you'd use Bluetooth Low Energy, I don't see any other like additional security concerns aside from maybe some type of middleman software, like if the government is, if they're kind of, or if government or some type of private company, I don't know who's really kind of building that infrastructure for 6G, if they're, adding some type of data collection beacon, like middleman transmission software that's able to catch some of that metadata. It obviously can't catch some of that like normal data, like web browsing data or anything like that. But any like metadata, if there's something kind of in the middle collecting that, besides like the cell tower, that could provide additional privacy concerns if that is part of the infrastructure, or if that is part of the foundation for the 6G infrastructure. But yeah, I don't really see any additional privacy or security concerns because we're already transmitting data using cellular. And I would say even you could argue it's even more secure, compared to something like 5G or 4G, which using a thing called cell tower simulation, CSS devices can actually downgrade those signals into less secure unencrypted 2G signals, which then the data sent between those can also be easily intercepted. Those are common at things like protests, or in places like New York with the NYPD, they have some devices like that. They're also called Stingrays. But yeah, I don't see any major like risks since we're already sending data over cellular networks. So
Yeah. Power is definitely limiting right now. I mean, the Apple Vision Pro had this huge battery pack that you had to wear in your hip. I've seen on TV some people who have to wear a court monitored ankle bracelet. The judge gets on them for not charging the device. So yeah, battery power is definitely an issue. And,
oh yeah, 100%.
If there was any way to get some sort of wireless system to charge devices, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think especially, there's already protections you can do with like cables, right? So if you go to like an airport, most people tell you to, don't use the USB plugs or the chargers in the airport. Because, when you plug a charging cable into a phone, not only can you charge it, but you can also send and receive data through it, right? That's why if you have like a MacBook and like an old school iPhone, you want to send music from your Mac to your iPhone, or you want to upgrade your iPhone or downgrade your iPhone, you connect it to your MacBook. And on Android, I know at least on Graphene OS, you can actually make it so only like power can be transmitted through that phone's USB Type-C port. So maybe there could be some extra protections added if there is that wireless power transmission. So I think, you could make it so like, I don't know, maybe you can make like a separate channel, like a separate encrypted channel for data, and then make the power channel, like where the channel that the power is received and transmitted on, extra secure. I mean, I don't really see any other like big vulnerabilities. Maybe you can make it 2 different types of channels and then make the power one much more secure, just because, it allows it allows it to have no data transmission on the power, but I don't really see like any major vulnerabilities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, very interesting discussion. And Xiaomi Redmi 13 writes 6G has a certain hertz range. And there's also a comment by Mike Lazine. Right now, though, a lot of places are still stuck with 4G, especially in places that are in rural areas and not in super cities like New York City. Well, it can be worse. So I have 5G generally in my area, but when I go up to Lake Tahoe, I have visited there intermittently for the past 15 years, and they still haven't been able to get any sort of reasonable mobile internet connection on the California side of Lake Tahoe. You go there, and often there's not 5G, 4G, or 3G. There is what is called LTE, which is so weak that it's barely usable at all. And sometimes there's just no signal. Even though it's a wealthy area, they could easily have placed some cell towers there. I am not sure what the problem is with getting actual infrastructure built in many parts of the country, even where there are resources and where there's demand. But infamously, the Biden administration had this initiative for broadband internet coverage that was to be made universal across the United States, and they spent billions of dollars. Nothing got built. And this even, let's say, devolved to the extent that a lot of Democrats are upset about it. Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson made a point of this in their recent book, Abundance, as to the convoluted bureaucratic process that was put in place, where it would have taken years to just vet any application by a state to get the federal funding to build that broadband infrastructure. So a few states ultimately passed through the hoops, but then the administrations changed and the initiative got scrapped, as far as I'm aware. So very unfortunately, because if it had worked, if it had achieved its intended purpose, maybe there would be more internet coverage in those remote areas. And
Sure. So LTE, that I believe that stands for long-term evolution. That is 4G, but it's like an enhanced version of 4G. So it's actually better than like 3G or normal 4G, which is nice. But yeah, I do agree that not all places have access to the fastest and best cellular tower networks. And also 5G is significantly more secure than 4G too, and 4G LTE. So yeah, I do agree that is a significant problem. And I mean, I think it's just because I think most of that is just private infrastructure, right? And people want to, create infrastructure whether it's, where they're going to receive the most amount of money or there's, the most usage. So yeah, that is a problem for sure. And yeah, Daniel, yeah, long-term evolution. Yeah.
yes, and Art Ramon has several comments. He writes that the smartphone is worthless with the LTE connection. So even though it's an enhanced version of 4G, for some reason, today's smartphones don't take well to it. And it's hard to even load a page with it. But maybe texting is good, Art Ramon writes. He also notes that people in some of these wealthy areas don't want the towers, or they want to make them look like ugly trees. There's this obsession with all natural appearances, and it's very anachronistic as well, because some of these people don't want any trees to be thinned to reduce the wildfire risk, and for decades they enforced a prohibition on people picking up dead leaves or pine needles from their property until the folly of that was ultimately recognized, because their idea of the natural is just whatever is untouched by man. They don't realize even the Native Americans would thin out the trees in that area. And before the 20th century, there were older trees, to be sure, but these old growth trees were spaced out a bit more to reduce the likelihood of a conflagration. So I think this mindset, especially among wealthy homeowners in these areas that only the, quote, natural is good needs to be challenged, and it needs to be challenged with regard to 5G. There are a lot of myths and misrepresentations about 5G as well.
I think the LTE thing where someone was saying like the LTE, like the smartphone's like worthless without LTE, I think that's also not just LTE's fault. I think it's also websites are jamming in so much more JavaScript into the websites. They're jamming in like 50 different analytics trackers. You know, they're jamming in like Facebook trackers, Google Analytics trackers, Pinterest trackers, and all, you know, to see, okay, how are my ads doing, right? They have, you know, Google ad trackers, right, to place the ads on the websites. And they also have like the Meta Pixel, the Pinterest Pixel, right? And those are basically saying, okay, how are my ads performing on my website? So they have like, you know, 50 different trackers on the websites that are loading it and stuffing it with tons of JavaScript, most of which is unnecessary. And yeah, that's also going to increase the amount of data that you have to pull, not only from the original website itself, but also all of the sub-processors and like, you know, third-party websites like Google Analytics, Pinterest, Facebook, Meta, Google. So even if you're using like the most private and secure browser set up or whatever, and you visit, you know, like a website and it's connected to Google, and, you know, like even if you don't have a Google account and you go to a non-Google website, it's still gonna connect to Google if it's using Google Analytics or Google Ads or something. But I think that definitely increases the amount of data you have to download from a website. So I think that's like another concern.
Yes, and it's interesting, Josh. So I have had now over 3 decades of experience of turning on computers and getting them to start. And we've had massive improvements in computer processing power since the 1990s. Computers do not start faster now than they did in the 1990s. I can tell you that from personal experience. So why is that? I hypothesize it's because of all of these additional programs that have been introduced, running behind the scenes, relaying information. Some of it, frankly, is bloatware. And I'm sure that on websites, a lot of it is bloatware as well, because for those sites that have still endured since the 1990s or early 2000s, they were pretty light. I remember you could just create a HTML page, maybe include a JPEG image file that doesn't take up that much memory, and the page would run very well. And even today, it would run very well. So if you had an internet or a version of the internet comprised of those pages, no pop-ups, no animations, just text and pictures, perhaps it would run a lot more smoothly, and it would run on LTE as well.
100%. Yeah, it'd probably run on 2G or 3G. Yeah, with the computer starting up, it's because, yeah, I mean, especially with Windows, I do not recommend using Windows. All sorts of advertising and spyware beacons are installed by default on Windows. Even on like Windows, like I think they install like Candy Crush, right? Like, you know, like the little mobile phone game that used to play, you know, when you're a kid. I think they have like Candy Crush on Windows. You know, if you have that starting up, and all of like this other, you know, analytics and tracking and even things to like validate, hey, is your product key for Windows, is that a valid product key? That's got to receive and send encrypted data to Windows key servers. So yeah, especially even on Macs, right? You've got Apple iCloud, you've got Apple, if you're running like a beta, and you're forced to use Apple's diagnostics system. All sorts of things, all sorts of bloatware, all sorts of spyware. And, you know, part of it is, you know, the company wants to make sure, okay, are there any crashes on the device? Is the software version running well for the devices? But also a lot of it's data collection, right? I mean, why is Windows not really cracking down on people, you know, using different key servers? Like they say, I think they publicly said that people can use different key servers, aka getting free versions of Windows, and they're not cracking down on it. They've also given people free upgrades to Windows 10. You know why? Because if with Windows, you're the product basically, right? If you're going to a website, Windows is going to collect some information about that, right? They want to know, okay, what websites have you been to? What, you know, why'd you go to it? Where'd you go to it? You know, what's your location? So yeah, they collect a lot of that data. You can go through all their privacy policies and stuff. They collect all the data. They sell to third-party companies because they make money off of personalized and targeted ads. So yeah, it's definitely because of additional bloatware and stuff. I mean, start up like a Windows 7 system, right? It'd probably boot faster than like a Windows 10 system. Windows 11, I think, has improved a lot of like the performance enhancements, but still has all sorts of Microsoft spyware and bloatware installed. I think phone operating systems are pretty good. Those boot up pretty fast. There's not like a lot of trackers that load up on like the bootloader itself. But still, especially like if you have like not like a Pixel like operating system, or not like an iOS operating system, but like a Samsung One UI or Huawei's operating system, like any of those third-party operating systems on Android, those let a boatload of malware, or not malware, spyware and other tracking like scripts and stuff when you boot them up. So yeah.
Yes, indeed. And John H. writes, the boot programs are huge compared to the old DOS systems, and I remember DOS as well. And they kind of neutralize the enhanced speed effects of faster RAM and CPUs.
Yeah.
Actually, I am a Windows 7 holdout, and I think you've made a good case for me to remain one, though I don't think I could port it onto any new PC. But honestly, in terms of like the key functionalities that I am looking for, it seems Windows 7 is as good as Windows 10 or 11, if not better. It has certain programs that Windows has deprecated in later versions. And also, it just doesn't have all of the pop-ups that a Windows 10 or 11 system throws at you at the start. I do not like pop-ups. Just as I want to be in control of my data, I want to be in control of my actions on the computer. Now, it's okay to have a portion of the screen that's dedicated to alerts and make suggestions like you should really take a look at this, but not interfere with your workflow.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think here's what I'll say. I'd like to get you, if you're interested in Linux, there's a lot of great benefits of using Linux over using Windows 7, including compatibility issues. If you're using Windows 7, basically all the software will work on Linux, either through just native support or using things like Wine, which stands for Wine is not an emulator, or using Crossover, which is like a proprietary version. So yeah, I mean, if you have any questions about Linux, just let me know. I recommend that over Windows 7, obviously, because there is still tracking in Windows 7. But Windows 10, Windows 11, I do not recommend at all. Even Mac OS, you can fix Mac OS a little bit by going into the privacy settings and stuff, using like a hardware firewall, which kind of stops a bunch of those built-in trackers from keying and receiving data to Apple servers. But do not recommend a Windows 10 or 7. Yeah, and also with like the websites, I will say one good thing I've been seeing is a lot of websites and stuff have been, a lot of programs have been wanting to use a thing called Markdown, which is like a text formatting language. Things like Obsidian and like other like types of note-taking systems have been using that. So I have been seeing like a lot more usage of some of those more open and minimal protocols, which is kind of cool.
yes, very interesting. Thank you. And your observations on Linux are duly noted. So we have some comments. First of all, from Daniel Tweet, he mentions the Dead Media project that was initially proposed by science fiction writer Bruce Sterling in 1995 as a compilation of obsolete and forgotten communication. So we need to make sure that there is an initiative to preserve information in all of those obsolete formats that are not easy to read anymore, and to maintain continuity of that information. Jennifer Hughes writes, she thinks that some of the smart jewelry and being able to project more and interact with teletactics will lead actual phones to fade. And you talked about smart jewelry as well. And in regard to foldable computers being developed now, she notes that Jacques Fresco of the Venus Project talked about that a long time ago. Now, Jacques Fresco lived to be 102, and he was active throughout much of the 20th century. But yes, he was a very forward-thinking futurist. So I was curious about the brain-computer interface that you have Josh. It looks like a non-invasive BCI that you can put on. What are some of its functions?
Sure. So it uses a public open source JavaScript SDK, which stands for Software Development Kit. So it can basically take all the brain data from all different channels on here, and you can basically make it. There's a few cool things. So there's one where it can do like a thing where it'll autoplay different like types of Spotify music based on like your brainwaves. If you're trying to like get into deep focus when you're working, there's like a dedicated program that they developed that'll do that. But also the biggest thing is just the public JavaScript SDK, where you can build anything, right? You get the data from the neural interface, and you can do whatever you want with it, right? It is free game. They're not locking down the data. It is use JavaScript. Whatever you can do with JavaScript, you can do. So I think that's like the biggest thing, especially if I did something in North Dakota where I could literally just think. I could just think of certain specific things like, eating an apple or something, or drinking water, right? And I can map those to different characters, like on a keyboard or something, and it would actually type it into ChatGPT and then click send without you having to touch anything. I can just think. It'll type it by itself, it'll send it, and then I can get that response. That's like that can be seen as like a very early cybernetic information system for future interfaces where you don't have to do all this fancy JavaScript stuff, and it'd be kind of built in by default using like a JavaScript applet or something. So I think the open software development kit, I think that's like the biggest thing about it.
So speaking of software development kits, Daniel Tweed has this comment: USDP is the software development kit for the free future.
Yes.
So thank you, Daniel. But now I'm curious, Josh, when do you think this capability of essentially typing through a brain-computer interface will become available? Is it a matter of a few years or more like a few decades?
It depends on what we're defining as available, right? I mean, it's technically available now, right? You got to do a lot of hacky ways, a lot of coding, and a lot of programming and stuff, using several different, programs and systems to work together. It really depends on how we're defining it being available. If we were to say someone was able to walk into a store and purchase some type of system for $500, with the current rate of like AI, I'm taking into account the current rate of agentic AI and those implications on manufacturing and like economics and stuff. Oh gosh, say it's 2025. I would probably say maybe 2028, 2029, maybe something like that could be possible. Whether it's you're buying it online, at that price point where something would be built in, I would say maybe 2028, 2029 could be feasible. But it's really difficult to kind of predict that.
So that's quite soon. And imagine a scenario like this. It may be a bit fanciful, but some entrepreneurs, including Elon Musk, have talked about essentially making humanoid robots available for humans to purchase. And Zoltan Istvan has even made a campaign promise to give every household in California a robot to help do the chores. But what if in the year 2029, you're out on a walk, you have your humanoid robot with you, you have a brain-computer interface, and you think a particular thought, and the robot has an AI, maybe a large language model inside it to help it to communicate. You think a thought, and the robot interprets it and speaks it using a robotic voice. So you're not actually talking, the robot is talking, but you're directing the robot to speak with your mind.
That's kind of cool. I mean, that's kind of like what we already see with digital agentic AI. And that's basically what that is basically physical agentic AI with like a cybernetic communications, medium to communicate with the robot. I mean, where we see how fast digital agentic AI is progressing. I mean, you can already make a website just by typing in natural language. You can do thousands, tens of thousands of line of code, in seconds, just by typing just a few words into something like lovable.dev or cursor. I think cursor or bolt.new. I mean, you can just go to those websites, type in a few sentences. It'll make a full website, something that used to take tens of thousands of dollars and, tens or maybe 20 programmers, that might have took months. Now you can do, even on like a foldable, you can even just sit, like lay in your bed, use a foldable and type it in and make just a website that works with the back end, front end, everything, right? So we're already seeing how fast this technology is progressing. And now we're starting to get into the physical realm of agentic AI with humanoid robots being developed by Tesla and other manufacturers. So if we're seeing how fast this digital agentic AI is progressing, think about how fast the physical AI is progressing once those humanoid robotics get to an affordable price point. Especially, we've already seen like kind of quote unquote the price collapse of a website development. You can do it for $5 if you want to make like a fully functional not just a website, right? Not just like a lead page or something, but like a full web application, right? Where you have user accounts, you can have like a directory list of stuff and people liking and engaging, and have like posts and stuff for like $5, and done within hours, and that's we've already seen that on like the news where you see software developers getting laid off and turning to things like blue collar work as a more viable alternative because of the price collapse of that specific skill of programming and web development.
Yes, and it is quite remarkable to observe what has been happening. You yourself, Josh, have created a number of websites remarkably quickly, and I do wonder sometimes what tools you've used to help you in that, because it doesn't seem to be the same kind of traditional web development approach. Of course, I remember the days of HTML-based web pages where either one would use a very rudimentary kind of web editor. Microsoft used to have a product called Front Page, which was fairly intuitive, but I actually taught myself a little bit of HTML code to go a bit beyond that. And then there were these open source, at least hopefully open source content engines like WordPress. And WordPress really is the best one of those, but you still have to create each page one page at a time. So I think you probably use some tools to expedite website creation beyond what a typical WordPress user would do.
Sure. So I would say, WordPress is open source. So there's two things. There's WordPress.com and then there's WordPress.org. Both of those use the same underlying open source CMS, which stands for Content Management System. WordPress.com is like the hosted / managed version, like the enterprise version. WordPress is open source. Also, with regard to WordPress, I would say look into Ghost CMS, GHOST CMS. That's actually like a more privacy preserving and lightweight version of WordPress, and also like much more security focused too, because WordPress has a lot of security vulnerabilities, especially if you start installing third-party extensions and plugins. Look into Ghost CMS, especially if it's for like a blogging website. That is actually really good. It's new. It's getting tons of updates. It recently just got an update called Ghost 6.0, and that actually allows your blog posts that you make on Ghost to be sent to a thing called the Fediverse, which is kind of like the decentralized area of communication. So if you've heard of Mastodon, it runs on the same protocol as Mastodon. So say you publish a post on Ghost CMS, right, like your blog, then you can go on Mastodon and see that post published, and it shows, it's like your little blog, it's like a profile and stuff. People can follow it and stuff. So I would actually look into Ghost CMS too as an alternative to WordPress. For websites, I use Framer, for websites, any of like public websites, I don't use AI to like code it or make it and stuff. I manually do it. But I'm still interfacing with a CMS, a content management system. So it's like a drag and drop website builder, right? You get all the site elements on the left, get the different types of elements. You can add images. You can add all sorts of things. You can use preset themes and kind of mix and match different themes. So it's kind of an intermediary in between actually, having Visual Studio Code in front of you and typing out all of the things and having like a local Apache web server and, posting it to that and refreshing it every 5 minutes. And then something like lovable.dev or bolt.new, which is a thing called a vibe coding software, which, is just where you type in natural language and it creates the website for you. So yeah, Framer and Ghost CMS.
Yes, thank you. That is very helpful. Now, Daniel Tweed has an interesting comment that I would like to highlight. He writes, to my mind, a main benefit of enhancing one's personal privacy is a kind of distancing effect from random crazies that might do you violence. And this is an important point. I think in most cases, for most people, if you disclose something personal about yourself, they're going to be fairly understanding, or even if they don't approve, they're not going to do anything. But there are these occasional random crazies, as Daniel points out, who really could get triggered by this information for whatever reason. They may be online trolls, they may have mental issues, whatever it may be. But without privacy, without individuals having that ability to decide based on their risk tolerance, what do they want to disclose, what do they want to keep to themselves, people are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. And I don't see any other way besides stronger privacy protection to really defend against that. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. I mean, you always see with like YouTubers, right? If someone has if YouTuber has like an Alexa or a Google Home, which is now called Nest Home, I don't recommend getting those devices. They are very privacy invasive. But, you've seen people using a thing called text to speech, which is where someone donates and they type in text and it's said on the streamer's computer. And, say that Alexa picks it up and accidentally leaks their home address. You've seen countless times, or they, people will call raids on them, or, where people will show up in front of their house and record and do weird stuff. So yeah, 100%, especially if you want to protect yourself against crazies or people, outside of that standard deviation of common sense and just craziness. Yeah, definitely stronger privacy. Knowing who to trust with your data, who to trust with certain pieces of information. I think that is important. That's your best defense, is a preventative defense.
Yes, indeed. And as an example, Daniel notes that Mark David Chapman's hatred for John Lennon simmered since his 1966 more popular than Jesus comment. And John Lennon was murdered in 1980. And Mike Lazine points out that swatting is another tactic that is used because of insufficient privacy safeguards. This has been done by online trolls. If they don't like some commentator, whatever that person's political orientation, they might pretend that there's a hostage incident at their house and call the police, and then the police show up with SWAT teams. I think there needs to be a public policy response to this. There needs to be some way of not going in with full force at first in those kinds of situations, because a SWAT raid, irrespective of whether it's a false alarm, could be deadly because of standard operating procedures. So I think policy needs to adjust to protect people against these kinds of hoaxes, very deadly hoaxes. But anyway, we are coming to the end of our virtual Enlightenment Salon, and I would like to invite you, Josh, to offer any concluding remarks in the minute that we have left, any other points that you would like to convey to viewers of our salon.
Yeah, I think with respect to the swatting public policy, maybe an efficient idea is for local police departments to keep a record of specific streamers and personalities that people that might or have a higher likeliness to be targeted for swatting attacks. And then if there is a attack call on them, for them to see, okay, are they streaming? If they are, see if there's anything weird going on, and maybe just wait outside or something till the end of the stream. If they're not, then do whatever the normal operating procedure is. Another thing is please be a proponent of privacy. If you're following the Clippy movement, set your profile picture to Clippy, which is an old Windows AI assistant. I mean, privacy is like muscles. If you don't use it, if you don't protect it, if you don't defend against it, if you don't advocate for it, you're going to lose it. And it's being under attack every day, especially nowadays with all these regulations and legislations being passed. If you have any other questions, go ahead and scan right here. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request on LinkedIn. Use my contact form. Send me any questions you have. I'll answer them. And then if you do want to join our Discord server for transhumanism, you can scan right here. Added a new privacy and security channel, which you can access by going into like the roles channel and then clicking privacy and security. So we can kind of do our best and our effort to approach this new technology and technological enhancement from a privacy preserving standpoint. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Josh. And yes, Clippy is well known to many of us. It's interesting that he is getting a second lease on life. His longevity is being prolonged by this privacy movement. And privacy is important to our longevity going forward. So please take what Josh has said seriously and look for ways to enhance your own privacy. And hopefully, as a result, we will all live long and prosper.